Your lesson essential question is, how are key details in a historical text connected? So again, today we're focusing on those key details and their connections in historical texts. Remember, a historical text tells us about something from the past. So maybe it's a person from history or an event. Maybe it's a place. We're going to be reading this text called Voyage of the Mayflower, and we're going to talk about some of those connections. The Mayflower was a sailing ship. It left England in September 1620. So I see sequence right here. I see a date. It tells me in September 1620, the Mayflower left. The ship was carrying 102 passengers. The passengers were later known as the Pilgrims. They were looking for a new place to live. So why did the Pilgrims leave England? They left because they were looking for a new place to live. So the cause of them leaving was they were looking for a new place to live. So we've got some cause and effect in here too. The voyage across the Atlantic Ocean took 66 days. This also tells us sequence. Without telling us it was 66 days, in our heads we might think it only took one day, or it could have taken a year, but we know it took 66 days. Many of the people got seasick as they traveled. There were many storms and leaky cabins. Their dogs, sheep, and chickens were not very happy either. The Mayflower had been sailing for Virginia, but when the ship reached Massachusetts, the Pilgrims thought they had gone far enough. They stopped where some Native Americans had cleared some land but had moved away. The Pilgrims called the place Plymouth. The Pilgrims started building a town. The cold weather slowed the progress. Most of the Pilgrims lived on the ship for the winter. Many wondered if they could survive in this new land. The coming of spring raised the hopes of the Pilgrims. Their future looked better. Maybe they could build a home here after all. So, when did they become hopeful? In the coming of spring. Again, this shows sequence. So we know in the winter things were not looking good, but once spring came, things looked hopeful. Why did the Pilgrims choose to stay in Massachusetts? I want you to answer that question. Tell the answer to somebody in the room. So maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's another grown-up, a pet, a stuffed animal. Why did the Pilgrims choose to stay in Massachusetts? You probably said because they thought they had gone far enough. Okay, let's take a look at some practice test questions together. So why did most of the Pilgrims live on the Mayflower in the winter? Let's go back to the text and figure out why they lived on the Mayflower during the winter. It's really important when we're taking a test that we look for the text evidence that proves our answer. That way we know we're not getting the answer wrong. So let's see, what paragraph did it talk about living on the ship for the winter? Here it says the Pilgrims started building a town. The cold weather slowed their progress. Most of the Pilgrims lived on the ship for the winter. So why did they live on the ship for the winter? Because the cold weather slowed the progress of building their town. So back to our question. Why did the Pilgrims live on the Mayflower in the winter? They liked living on the ship more than land? That's not what our text evidence said, so I'm going to eliminate that answer. It was too cold to build a town to live in? Well, we know that the cold weather is slowing their progress of building their town, so that could be the answer. They were afraid of the Native Americans? No, the text didn't say anything about that. They were still trying to get to Virginia. Well, in the text it said they thought they went far enough when they got to Massachusetts, so we know they're not trying to go to Virginia still. So we found text evidence that said it was too cold to build the town where they lived. The cold weather was slowing their progress. Okay, number 2, choose an answer from the box to finish the sentence. Write your choice on the line to finish the sentence. When spring came, the Pilgrims, we have became hopeful, became gloomy, decided to leave, or returned to the ship. Let's go back to the text to see what happened. Now, I know that I already circled my sequence words, so the coming of spring raised the hopes of the Pilgrims. So here's my text evidence right here that answers number 2. So when spring came, the Pilgrims became hopeful. Well, my text evidence does say raised the hopes of the Pilgrims. So that could be my answer, but we want to make sure we read all of the answer choices. Became gloomy? Definitely didn't say that. Decided to leave? No, that's not what it said. Returned to the ship? Well, that was in the winter, wasn't it? So when spring came, the Pilgrims became hopeful. And that's exactly what our text evidence said that we underlined. So tell your partner the information in the passage that supports your answer to what the Pilgrims did when spring came. We've already underlined that text evidence. The coming of spring raised the hopes of the Pilgrims. You're going to be taking a test kind of like this on Friday using a different text about Squanto and the Pilgrims. So it kind of goes with the voyage of the Mayflower, but it's going to tell you more about what happened when they got there. Okay, you're going to be answering questions just like these for your test on Friday. Today, you're going to be using Voyage of the Mayflower to do a discussion post, and tomorrow you're going to do a little bit of writing with the Voyage of the Mayflower. So remember, in your discussion posts, it's okay if you record your voice or video yourself answering the question. But in your writing, you want to make sure that you're actually writing tomorrow, because that's an assignment.